long before the gig economy was popular as it is now, I was already working as a freelancer. I spent most of my professional career outside the system working with companies rather than working for them. And so when people ask me how I do it or what it's like, I think what they're really asking me is what it's like to succeed outside their comfort zone. And if I had to point to something, it would be the fact that I spent the first few years of my life as an outsider. And I think in hindsight, those early years shaped my view on change and comfort. And in sort of a fateful twist, being on the outside where change was sort of the norm and upheaval was the norm, changed my view of change and really made me more comfortable with it, as well as the possibilities that are available outside our comfort zone. You see, by the time that I was 14, I'd lived in 5 cities on 3 different continents, and I'd learned as many languages. I'd also become very good at the ritual of trying to fit in, and by the time we moved to Toronto in 1971, the joys of not even bothering. But still, change was a challenge. It was hard to cope with, and I figured that it was keeping me from doing things that a young boy wants to or needs to do. So I decided that if I was going to live with this mess, I'm going to do it on my terms in a way that made sense for me, which came together in Montreal just before we moved to Toronto. I really learned how to be comfortable with the uncertainty of change and at the same time prosper outside my comfort zone. And what's really interesting from my perspective is it happened doing something that I truly hate, which is dancing. I don't like to dance now. It'll be interesting later on this evening. Didn't like to dance then. Back at the school dances, I would go up to the pretty girls and ask her if she'd like to sit this one out. But in grade 7, I developed an interesting relationship with the tango. Yes, that da-da-da-da-da, that tango. Yes, that's right. You see, it all started, I guess, in January of 1968 when we moved to Canada from Israel. I lived in an immigrant working class neighborhood where I went to the Coronation Public School, which was part of the Protestant School Board of Greater Montreal. This led to an interesting dynamic later on where I was doing swing low, sweet chariot in the morning and bar mitzvah lessons in the afternoon. So being new to snow, you can imagine, why basketball and not so much hockey was our sport of choice. Our team had names like Blagoya Namovsky, Itamar Ben David, and Tibor Shanto. And so our gym teacher was encouraging, but she was more into track and field, not really basketball. So our team was average at best the first couple of years, and when we made it into the regional tournament, we generally fell out in the first round. But then, in June of 1970, we got some great news for a change. We were getting a brand new gym teacher. And not just any gym teacher. This gym teacher had the reputation of taking his schools to the finals and winning. So in September, we were all excited because of the basketball, and I knew that I was going to make the team for one simple reason. You see, in January of 1970, I was 5'1", and in September of 1970, I was 6'1". Now, you can teach a lot of stuff, but you can't teach tall. So, our first practice really did not go as planned at all. There were no basketballs, just an old Lloyd's record player with speakers either side of the net. And then the new coach put on a piece of music that I was familiar with because I'd seen my parents dance to it many times. And that's exactly what the dude began to do. Skillfully, he led his invisible partner right across the parquet. And when he was done, he looked over and he said, "Your turn." And I thought to myself, yeah, right. But then it struck me that it's one thing to deal with change when it's thrown at you, but it's entirely different when you have to make the choice to do it on your own. And that's exactly where I was. I had to make a choice. There wasn't the comfort of having to react to something. So, I was determined, a little bit awkward, but I stepped off. I would say I was more gyrating than dancing, but I complied. Now, this went on for a couple of weeks, and in theory, my dancing got better, but I still had no idea what dancing to Tommy Dorsey had to do with basketball. But this guy had street cred. He was going to take us to the promised land, the big game, so I suffered on. And a couple of weeks later, just as my resolve was beginning to weaken, all of a sudden he said, we're going to make a change here. Forget the ballroom dancing. We're going with the tango. Yep, da-da-da-da-da, that tango. And then to make it interesting and spice it up just a little bit, he said, and we're going to do it with the girls. Now, you have to remember, by this time I was 13. My voice was changing, hair was coming out of the most oddest places on my body, and these girls did not look the way they did the year before. But again, I remembered Nirvana and who was going to take me there. So a couple of more weeks of this, and again, frustration was setting in. I was ready to give up. And all of a sudden, the next practice, things changed. There was no stereo, there was no speakers, there was a rack of basketballs. So the coach then asked each of us to do a layup, and each of us missed. Being that I was a little taller than most, I missed by a little bit less. He then, without a word, walked to his office, took out one of the dreaded speakers, good not to step on that, took out one of the dreaded speakers, put on the tango, he picked up a ball, and he did a near perfect layup. 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing but net. So he had each of us do the layup to the tango as well, and each of us scored 2 points, and there was literally a new light shining off the parquet. The rest of that season, we practiced every play to music all the way to the finals. Each of us knew where we had to be, why, and when. And it was all set to the process, all done to the music, but every minute of it was outside our comfort zone, especially mine having to dance all the way through. And while we didn't win the big game that year, it was the furthest that any one of us had ever gotten. And for me, it was the first of many tango moments, moments where I intentionally and knowingly stepped outside of my comfort zone in order to get ahead. And what I learned from tango moments is that discomfort, change, and growth are 3 sides of the same coin. And it allows me to function in the unknown as opposed to having to avoid it. What I also learned is that the big antidote to the unknown is actually trust. And in my case, I had to trust my leader, I had to trust my teammates, I had to trust the process. But mostly, I think I learned to trust myself. And as a result of that, this is one of those moments where I knew it. So again, the other thing that happened as a result of that is I was able to expand my comfort zone, and in the process also be able to navigate more comfortably outside my comfort zone, which then opened my eyes to all the possibilities that I would have missed had I been safely tucked away. And I knew that I was making progress when I began to realize that my comfort zone actually began to resemble a zone of limitation. And each time I put on a tango, I got more moments, and I collected more moments, and I grew my how muscle, which came in really handy when I had my biggest tango moment, which was on April 12th, 2015, at about 9:20 p.m. I'd spent the afternoon at the hospital with my mother, and I just dropped her off, and I was one left turn away from spending the rest of my Sunday with a cold beverage. When I came to, I was on the floor of my car. I was disoriented and in pain. My left foot was severed off at the ankle. The police estimated that the car that struck me head on was traveling at about 160 kilometers per hour. My first thought was, man, I work on my feet for a living. I've got a gig in Windsor, in Orlando, and Winnipeg, and I guess I'm not running that half marathon in about 3 weeks. I say I was beat with a capital F. The second thought was, nothing in this crumbled Ford was going to help me. It was tango time. Ta-da-da-da-da. I began to hear it. I need to call my wife. In hospital, the music kept me company, the tango kept me calm, and being calm allowed me to think. I was able to work through each element of the challenge, and I would say one dance at a time. I got to master the knee roller, and I got my clients all excited about a brand new program that I was offering called a crash course in prospecting. Now, the reality is that none of us, and especially me, being lazy, I never set out to find the hard things, but life always offers up an alternative. And that's where my tango moments help me. They help me understand what doesn't matter, which frees up bandwidth for me to focus on things that I can actually control. And when I apply my unique tango moments, I'm able to change things to happen the way that I want them to happen now by focusing on the here and now. Now, I know that there are moments when I had the opportunity to step up and I chose not to. And candidly, the only thing I have to show for those moments are a few might have beens. But at the same time, I know that every time I put on the tango, I change the moment by how I step into it. So this holiday season, I would encourage you to find your moments, collect them, and make sure that they give you all the possibilities that you want for your future.